I like to say that transparency builds trust, and trust is the currency you spend when you have problems.
Welcome to Direct Approach, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by Wayne Moorehead, filled with timely insights, fresh perspectives, and actionable takeaways from your direct selling executive peers to help fuel the growth and evolution of your business. In this episode, Wayne sits down with Serra, CEO of Make Wellness, to explore how intentional pre-launch planning, transparency, and values-driven leadership create momentum that lasts. But before we begin, we'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, InfoTrax. In today's digital landscape, direct selling companies face a critical challenge: transforming traditional practices into modern, customer-focused models without losing their core identity. FlexCloud, powered by InfoTrax's world-class commission engine, provides the foundation direct selling leaders trust. Our platform seamlessly connects your ecosystem with premier service providers while delivering the commission accuracy and flexibility that drives distributor confidence and retention. Experience how industry leaders leverage FlexCloud's integrated architecture to enhance customer journeys, equip distributors with intuitive mobile solutions, and access real-time analytics for strategic growth, all while maintaining the relationship-driven essence that defines successful direct selling in an evolving marketplace. Now let's hear from your host, Wayne Moorehead, and his guest, Serra.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. I am your host, Wayne Moorehead, and today's guest is an inspiring direct selling leader with decades of experience in the wellness industry. He's recognized for his strategic and operational expertise, and especially in rapidly scaling one of the fastest growing companies in the channel today. I'm excited to welcome Serra, CEO at Make Wellness. Justin, thank you so much for being here today.
Wow, thanks for having me on, Wayne. It's a pleasure to join the podcast today.
Yeah, the honor is ours, and I am so excited to learn more about Make Wellness. It's a company that I and the rest of us have been following since the launch, and excited to dig in and learn more about the dynamics and the decisions and the details that have led you to where you are today, which, as I mentioned, is one of the fastest growing companies in the channel. But before we get there, we'd love to know a little bit more about the path that led you into the direct selling channel.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been in the industry. Oh gosh, we start to get to a space where we talk about it in decades and instead of years, and I'm approaching that for sure. So I'm about 2 decades into the industry, and I came in purely through the corporate side. So I've never been on the field side. Some executives, start there and kind of end up in the exec side, but I got involved in direct sales through the corporate side. I was hired to work for a little startup many years ago, and my experience up until that point was really traditional business, mainly two-step distribution, working with kind of big box retail. And so the experience that I had kind of getting involved in direct sales from the corporate side was interesting to me, because as the company scaled, I was just shocked at how quickly it was growing, and I really loved that business side of it. But more importantly for me, I was used to really working with, a buyer who you'd meet with and, do a purchase order for 1 million widgets, and, company would fulfill it. And that was the business experience and the engagement. And so when I got involved in direct sales and really got to experience, working with the field sellers and even the end consumers, I just really fell in love with that aspect and that dynamic of the industry. And once I got bit with that bug, you could say, I've never looked back, and just always had a love for the industry and just that really, person to person dynamic that's really unique about our space. And so that's how I got involved, and I have been so ever since.
Yeah, it is that person to person aspect, the human relation aspect that people grow to love the most about the channel. But those that come in from other channels or other industries, as you mentioned, the thing that surprises everyone the most is the speed and scale and potential that this channel allows and empowers. And once people see both of those aspects, they are hooked. They want to stay in the direct selling business forever. As I mentioned, this is such an incredible story around Make Wellness. And one of the things that makes it so interesting is the time in which you launched. So as we all know, this is a very dynamic time. We're
Hmm.
seeing lots of shifts across all aspects of business, from how we discover products to how we connect and communicate with one another, even to how we approach income generation. And I'm curious how these shifts that were, flashing lights at the time of starting this company, how they informed the strategy and the go forward, and what that opportunity was that you saw in the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that's a great place to start because, if I'm being totally transparent, I think that there was some reflection in the very early parts of the discussion, asking questions about, the industry itself. And, my business partners together is primarily, my business partner Justin Prince, our chairman Truman Hunt, and our chief marketing officer and founder Robert Finnegan. The kind of the four of us in that first little foray there, we're really asking those tough questions of, man, is the industry viable? Is this a place that we actually want to invest, not just our hard earned dollars, but also, time and attention. And ultimately, our love for that industry and belief that, there was still a way to do it in a successful and authentic way led us to the path of starting Make Wellness. But we asked those questions in the beginning. And I think any business operator is probably asking some of those serious questions about the viability. And that I think what we came to, Wayne, was less about is the space itself viable, and more started asking those questions of what pivots are necessary from what was the past to create a business in the space that could have longevity. And so as we shifted that paradigm and started asking those questions, that's when we got excited and ultimately put all of our time and energy into launching Make Wellness, and here we are.
Well, I'm glad that you and your team were so thoughtful about those dynamics and how to really leverage them, because this is such an exciting time for anyone that's involved in person to person selling. There's such a huge opportunity for all these companies, but yeah, we need to do it as we always have. We need to shift and do things a little bit differently for today's consumers, for today's distributors.
Hmm.
And I know we're excited as we continue to talk to learn more about what some of those pivots were and how you kind of triangulated your strategy to really stand out in the marketplace and make sure that there was this incredible growth opportunity.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was following really closely was your pre launch period.
Hmm.
And I know that was an important part of the strategy. I think the numbers, and you can correct me, something around in 65 days, 100,000 products were shipped during that pre launch period. Can you talk about that phase and the role that it played in generating momentum and excitement?
Yeah, for sure. I think, it's actually kind of an interesting part of the story that maybe is a little bit nuanced. And as I look back on, kind of the timeline, I'm really grateful for this kind of specific dynamic. So I had left a company and was basically in a 1 year non-compete. So for this whole year period, we couldn't be public. We couldn't sell products. We couldn't, do these things. And, under advice of attorneys, we could do some of those pre-launch activities, but we really couldn't start. And it was interesting because it kind of forced us to take the time to architect that strategy, and really invest our time and energy in what that launch would look like. And I think, a lot of companies, they just come on the scene too fast. They're not ready for, whatever may come, whether that's, either operationally or technology wise or with organizing their field, whatever that may be. And so we kind of we were forced to take that time. And so we could put a lot of really concerted energy in that launch. So we put together, a strategy. We had a pre-launch period, where people could get involved, which isn't so unique. I think a lot of companies do it that way. Um, but because we kind of had this period that we had to wait to launch, we started to really put a lot of effort into building the energy and building the story rather than just kind of rushing to ship that first product. And so when that time finally came, I feel like we were really prepared to have a really successful launch. And even given all of those dynamics, that scale still was challenging from a supply chain standpoint. We still had to manage that well, and the team did a phenomenal job with that launch in making that work. And even a little bit of that scarcity starts to feed on itself, and even that generates additional excitement. And so, yeah, we had basically about 50,000 individuals who pre-launched with us, you could say, who kind of came in during that first period, and then yeah, we were shipping. I think it was north of 100,000 products in those first 2 months. So it was quite a wild ride there. But the kind of forcing ourselves to slow down, that saying, slow down so you can speed up. We had to live that, and ultimately that was kind of the story of our launch there.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that preparatory period proved to be a real advantage with the scale and growth that you saw. I'm curious, during that time period, was there a decision that you and the team made that mattered more than you realized?
I think there's a lot of things that companies need to do when they start up. We like to say around here that our companies in our space, they operate on confidence and belief. And it's not something that shows up in spreadsheets. It's the intangible. And if that's true in kind of a normal course operating business, it's multiple times more true when you're a startup, because that is when that you're inviting somebody to get involved when you don't have a track record. They may or may not know the people who are involved in it. And so building that confidence and belief is job number one. And so for us, I think that some building some decisions around just the platform that we're on from a technology standpoint, the ability for us to have a brand that people could look at and say, wow, that looks very well done. It's put together. It almost like it feels bigger than it is a little bit. The ability for us to make, manufacture, and ship products in a timely way, like all of those things are just multiple times as important when you're starting up, because you're really starting to build that confidence and belief. I think early on, for us, we had made a decision from a technology platform to launch the business, and as we started to get closer and closer to that launch date, we started to have some concerns around some partners' ability to execute on that strategy. And that was probably one of the first, as the CEO, challenging decisions that we made. Is we made a decision, uh, just in those early days, I mean, just with a ridiculous timeline, actually to shift from the technology platform that we had started on to a totally new platform. And it was a big risk, but ultimately we felt like if we could, communicate to the people that have come with us along this journey, and we're transparent with them, we trust them as our partners, we'll be able to make that transition. So in those early days, we did transition from a full technology platform into a new platform. Really focused on building that confidence and belief and making sure that we had a structure that could support the growth that we anticipated was going to come. And looking back, it was a good decision. It was a smart decision, but at the time, it was a very risky decision, you might say.
Sure, it was definitely scary. And I think that speaks a lot to your leadership style. Probably the easier route would have been, hey, we've made this commitment. Let's get it out into the marketplace. Let's see how it's going. Maybe we can customize or enhance and improve for there. But making a wholesale switch over definitely was the right move, but I'm sure was nerve-wracking throughout
Yeah.
the decision process. So also when these orders started coming in and people started enrolling, I'm curious, did it reach a number? Was there a moment when you and the team looked at each other and realized that something really extraordinary was happening?
Yeah, and I think we started to have kind of that gut check a little bit early on, even before we shipped that first product, because just I'm just a huge believer in leadership. There's a few ingredients in the recipe of what makes a great direct selling company, and absolutely part of that recipe is really great field leadership. And so as we started to see some of the individuals who were interested in helping us launch the business, you could start to get a sense for, okay, this is not just one or two really great powerhouse individuals. It was like a stable of these folks, and so you started to get a feeling for, okay, wow, something special is happening. And if again, in transparency, we were probably also the beneficiaries of some timing within the industry. So right as we were in that preparatory phase, you saw, two large companies in our space make some big shifts in their business models with Rodan and Fields and Body, to where we had the opportunity to attract some really amazing leaders as well to help actually go through that launch process. And so we could feel that it wasn't just we're going to launch, we're going to turn the lights on, and we're going to hope a few people show up. It's like before we even shipped that first product, we had a group of leaders that I think a lot of companies would spend years and years trying to build, and probably maybe still never get to that point. So we knew that it was coming, and we had our original projections that we had started a year before, and I'm pleased to say that first month of business that we had, we exceeded our annual projections of what we thought we were going to do over the whole year in the first month. So it was an exciting time, but also one where you felt a lot of weight and responsibility. I mean, these are leaders who could go to any company that they could choose, and they could go be successful. And so there was a weight upon us to say, man, we have to execute here, because they've put a lot of trust and confidence, confidence in us. And if you miss that opportunity, it's really hard to get it back. So we luckily, things came together. We had a great group of people, a lot of trust with those folks, and ultimately was a great success. But I give that credit to those amazing field leaders who really helped up the confidence of those people around them, and kind of make on the map, because you had some really powerful names involved in it.
You have attracted some incredible talent in the field and on the corporate side. And I'm curious, how did you signal to those leaders that Make Wellness would be a great home for them, as they were transitioning from other companies? Well, what did that process look like?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a relationship business, and the truth is, I think any business is at its core relationship business, and so a lot of that was leveraging relationships. My key partner, our core founder in Justin Prince, has had decades of experience in the industry, and kept a really strong reputation within that space. Has always invested in leaders, and been one of those individuals who people could rely on and trust. And so a lot of that came down to his really great reputation in the field. I've always been on the corporate side, kind of behind the scenes guy. And, certainly I've had experience with some of our folks. So I think they recognized the two of us together was an interesting dynamic, but really it was his public facing reputation, and really leveraging that credibility that helped us to attract some really, really amazing people in those early days.
Thank you for sharing that. So the growth continued and has continued well past pre-launch into the first year and beyond. I'm curious, you mentioned making sure you had the right technology in place. Mm-hmm. Were there other key factors that really helped ensure that you were prepared for the rapid scaling that has taken place?
Yeah, operationally, that is one of the areas that, companies can get tripped up on quickly. I mean, you could have a great field leaders, you could have a good stable technology base, but if you start to run into out of stock issues or other kind of operational challenges, that can really, really slow you down. I'm still amazed at this point how the team was able to execute and really keep us in stock through, a growth curve that, others might really be daunted. I think that the partners that we work with, from ingredient manufacturers, packaging suppliers, like I think everybody in that supply chain kind of sensed that maybe it was something special and unique going on. And so really pulled out all the stops, partners that just went above and beyond maybe what normal course would have been to make sure that we were able to fulfill, those product orders. Again, our team, even though it was very small, our science, quality, and compliance team had just literally had worked around the clock. So you just had zero quality issues related to the products, because even if you have them to ship and you end up with a quality issue, that's really scorching earth with your customer base. So for us, it was really having, I think, those discussions early on too with the partners that we were bringing in to help us in sharing that vision with them, so that they could see, hey, if we perform at our best, this is going to be a great investment in the startup company that ultimately will pay some dividends. And that's been true. We have a handful of really key relationships from manufacturing, distribution, and others who they invested in us in the sense that they, put that time and attention in a company that maybe didn't have the track record, but they believed in the vision that we had and outperformed.
What was the biggest challenge that you faced during those initial months? Was it supply chain? Was it just communicating and managing the relationships with the field? What was that biggest challenge that you, as the CEO, felt like most of your focus needed to be on?
We've got an interesting and dynamic team, especially with the relationship that I have with Justin Prince, where he's such a great leader in the space and has been a field leader through his entire career. So him kind of coming over to the corporate side as a founder of the company really allowed us to divide and conquer in a way. So he's just so great with the field, and I almost felt like, okay, I can put my attention over here on these operational things, supply chain and other things, because I know that side of it is handled. And I think that kind of divide and conquer strategy really helped. We brought in some amazing teammates in helping that. One of which, Tyler Whitehead, who, Tyler has been the CEO of Arbonne and others. I mean, he could do my job 2 times over, and yet he's on our executive team. We just had a really great team of people who were so highly capable that we were able to really kind of split up those responsibilities and just knew that our teammates were going to deliver in those areas. And I think that kind of divide and conquer strategy allowed us to manage each of those individual areas well, and ultimately led to a really great launch and ultimately kind of first year and beyond.
Yeah, your core team there definitely has some incredible superpowers. Shout out to Tyler and Truman and Justin and Robert and the whole team there. Just an incredible group of direct selling executives. I want to talk product for a couple minutes here, if we can, and shift there. So in direct selling, one of the big trends that we're seeing is that the service-based companies are experiencing a greater growth trajectory than the product-based companies. Why do you feel that Make Wellness is one of those highly visible exceptions that are product-based, product-driven, that are really seeing incredible scale?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, business is trends and timing. I think kind of hearkening back to the earlier discussion about the timeline and kind of us being forced into this maybe slower launch process, or pre-launch process, I should say. It gave us the opportunity to not rush with a product decision. I think a lot of companies they're so quick they just want to get those sales generated, and they want to start generating commissions for their field leaders, and they kind of feel like, hey, that's the key to getting this thing launched, is we just got to get something in the machine. And ultimately, I think that can come back to be a problem, especially when your goal is to be a consumer-centric company, because consumers just have too much choice. They're too educated. It's too easy for them to get information. So you just have to have amazing products. And so we didn't have to rush that decision. We didn't have to go white label something and just try to go fast. And so we really had the opportunity to study the kind of trends and timing. And, I think now, especially just with the explosion, kind of peptides, just even the term peptides is much more common. But even 18 months ago or 2 years ago, when we were kind of starting down this path, they were still relatively new in kind of just the exposure to the average customer. But you could kind of see and feel that trend was moving in that direction in a rapid way. So again, I think it allowed us to see that trend, learn about it, find some really amazing partners and some research labs that were doing some really interesting things in the space, partner with those labs, and then ultimately build some great products over a year-long process that was very key to the success. That core kind of product launch and that story being very on trend really helped us to explode onto the space, because ultimately, as important as the field leadership is, as important as our sellers are, the key to that whole machine is products that consumers want to buy. That's what drives the entire engine, and I'm a huge believer in that. And so for us, the product and it being something that consumers were looking for in the marketplace was our key to really being competitive with other companies in the space.
Are you ready to revolutionize the way your direct selling company accesses industry insights? Introducing the DSN Library's Smart Search, an AI-powered tool that puts over 2,000 curated assets at your fingertips. From compensation trends to emerging markets, answers are just a click away. If you're already a DSN supporter, then you have access to Smart Search right now. If not, it's time to check out our updated program. Starting at just $1,000 per month, your entire company can get access to the channel's most comprehensive collection of education and insights available. Visit directsellingnews.com/supporter to see a demo of Smart Search in action and to learn how your company can become a supporter now. We also invite you to join us at the DSN Marketing Deep Dive event, February 25th, 2026 in Lehi, Utah, where we'll address the marketing realities facing direct selling companies today. This event brings together candid executive perspectives, practical education, and real-world case studies from leaders who are navigating the same complex marketing landscape you face every day. Visit dsnevents.com today for details.
I think that's really great advice and insights. And I think we have all seen many times as direct selling companies have been launched, it has been a rushed process because there is a leader or leaders that they don't want to miss out on the opportunity. And so maybe artificially launch too quickly and don't have the strategy in place. But one of the themes that is continuing throughout this conversation is taking the time to really make sure that you have the strategy right, the business model, the product, the compensation plan, those relationships. And if you have those things right, then the leaders and the right leaders will end up finding you because they'll want to be part of a solid strategy, a solid launch. And so I think that's really great insight. One of the other dynamics and elements to the growth and during this preparatory period was the compensation plan. And you had the opportunity that most direct selling companies that are farther in their life cycle don't have, and that is designing a compensation plan from scratch, one that is focused and ready for today's landscape, today's distributors. How did this inform the design, and what did you want to do differently from a comp standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's really key. It's been said that you get the results that your structure is designed to get, and so the heart of that is your comp plan. You're gonna ultimately get the results of where you put the rewards, and so it's key for companies to really be intentional about how they think about where those commission dollars go. Every one of them is precious, so we did take that time and opportunity. And I think a lot of what informed that really harkens back to the previous experience that Justin Prince, myself, a couple of other key members of our team had in really the transformation of the New Ways company into Modere. And again, we're talking now 12, 13 years ago. But that whole idea started with a pivot from being kind of more recruiting and distributor focused into saying if we actually focus on the consumer, then that part of the business will take care of itself. And so it's a little bit of a paradigm shift. Now, I think most companies have followed that trend, and I think it was a really important shift in our industry, frankly. I think that we were part of pioneering this kind of pivot into a more consumer centric model. So there were a handful of things, that we did back then that helped Modere be successful in those early years. And so as we were leveraging, what do we want to do here at Make? How do we want to create a compensation plan from scratch? That was the first part of it, was saying, okay, how do we create a customer first approach? But remember earlier we said leaders are one of the key recipes of a successful company. So it can't ever be at the expense of your leaders. And so marrying those two things is really the magic and kind of the secret, I think, behind today's modern comp plan is how do you motivate the seller who's great at selling to the consumer, but create an opportunity for the leader who's great at managing and organizing the teams. And so that's the balance ultimately that we came from. And look, I'll be the first to admit that we made a few mistakes, when we started. We had to tweak a few things. We had some assumptions about a brand new plan that, there was a few areas of that plan that overpaid, and we had to make some adjustments. And, part of that is actually as a leader of the company, I think sometimes leaders get this confused a little bit, where in the interest of having that confidence and trying to build the credibility, they're coming out and they're saying, hey, we're so confident that we're not going to make a mistake, so you can trust us. Where I believe at a different approach. I believe in saying you can trust us because we know we're going to make mistakes, and when we do, we're going to fix those and correct those mistakes. And most importantly, we're going to be transparent with you through that process. And so we were able to do some innovative ideas. Some worked, some didn't, but we already had the expectation that because we were trying to do some new and interesting things, that we were going to have to make some modifications. And so going in, our teams knew that and were willing to go along that journey with us. So that was a big piece of the puzzle for sure.
Setting that expectation early on that the compensation plan might adjust, I think, is especially important in today's environment to condition the field that this is going to happen. Things are going to change. Things are moving so quickly now, and we want to be at the forefront of it. Can you talk a little bit more about how you handled the process with the field of making those tweaks? How did you communicate? How did you pull them in and involve them in the decision-making process so that they could champion it to their downlines and their groups?
Yeah, that's a great question, Wayne. And I think this concept transcends compensation plan. We're just simply talking about it in this idea. But I like to say that transparency builds trust, and trust is the currency you spend when you have problems. And so, I'm a believer in transparency. I think a lot of companies kind of tried to hide behind this veil of like, hey, we're, no problems over here, look the other way. When in reality, it's business. There's going to be issues. There's going to be problems. There's going to be challenges. And I think respecting your field leaders as the partners, the smart business people that they are, is the way to get through those things. And so this idea of like, we're going to be transparent with you. Of course, there's a handful of things that are, internally confidential, but beyond a few of those things, I'm very transparent with our leaders in our field, and I think that pays dividends. So, there's a kind of an order of that communication, and so talking to your top leaders, involving kind of the next layer, and so on and so forth. I think that process is very important. The process of change management is maybe one of the most, underrated skills of business leaders is how do you manage through that change? And you said it in the question that the communication is actually the key part of that. Nobody should be surprised by any of these things that are coming down, especially when it comes down to something as critical as compensation. And so the truth is when you open the kimono a little bit and you actually show, hey, here's the challenge. Here's why this is going to be unsustainable and ultimately would hurt your business. And here's the ideas that we have on how to solve that. And you just get this buy-in and involving, I think, some core leaders early on. I also love to say people support what they help create. So the worst thing you can do is have what I call ta-da moments, meaning, okay, everybody tune in, ta-da, here it is. It's a collaborative process because if they get their fingerprints on it, they will support it when it comes time to roll it out. And I think that was really key in these compensation plan changes that we had, early on in our life cycle.
I love that. I agree. I think distributors might love something that we're introducing. They might not like something that we're introducing or changing, but there should be no surprises.
Right.
As long as there's no surprises, you can ride almost any wave.
Right.
So with those decisions and those actions around transparency, obviously that has a huge impact on the culture of the company, both internally and externally. I'm also curious during that pre-launch period where you did have the time to develop those strategies, how much of the discussion was around culture and defining the culture that you wanted to create there, both at the company and in the field?
I'm glad you mentioned that because we would be remiss, talking about a startup and talking about the company if we didn't actually talk about the culture. It's so key. I think as a CEO, is the operational part of our business important? Yes. Is making sure that, financially it's sound? Yes. All of these things, managing the board, like all of these things that we do at the end of the day, job number one for the CEO, in my opinion, is culture. And when you get that right, you can weather any storm. When you get it wrong, it doesn't matter what comes, you'll never get through it. So culture is absolutely key to that. My belief is that the culture has to be rooted in the values of the company. And every company has values. Every company can point to the values. They can point to the mission. They can point to their vision. We all have them. The question is does the company live them? And that's in the daily decisions and the representation of who the company is and what they do when those challenges come. So I'm a believer that you look through every problem through the lens of your values. It was Roy Disney who said, when your values are clear, decision making becomes easy. And I think what that means is that executing that decision might not be easy, but knowing what to do when your values are clear actually is the easy part. You can make the decision quickly. And I think that applies to companies. I think it applies to people. And so for us, actually, we spent a lot of time. I know I keep talking about this time period that we had before we launched, but one of those things that we spent a lot of time on was actually developing and articulating and clearly aligning our launch team, our executives and field leaders with what those values are. Who did we want to be? What type of a company did we want to be? And clearly articulating the values and the mission and the vision so that they would be that touchstone or the anchor as we went through what we went through. And I hope that as we've gone down this path now for over a year, that those values have shown through in the way in which we've executed our decisions and the way we've conducted ourselves and all of the things, because that's how you build that culture. It's not what you say, it's what you actually do. And so ultimately, I think that is so key.
I love that. And I love that you referenced the values or principles or these pillars that are established early on as lenses for decision making. Speed, especially in a high growth company, is important, and being able to make decisions quickly is imperative. And if you know who you are and who you're not, what you do and what you don't, then you can move even quicker, which I know was part of the success of the company. I'm curious on the technology front. Obviously, with being more product focused, consumer driven, e-commerce is increasingly important. How did you think and approach your e-commerce platform and approach to e-commerce?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a trap a lot of companies fall into, including us, is in a sense being kind of wooed that the technology itself is part of what the secret of the success is, and I think it is, but ultimately it's the stability of that technology that's more important than the features or whatever it is that a company may be wanting to produce. At the end of the day, stability matters most. And so for us, we learned that lesson early on. We did push ourselves into this place of saying, hey, we want this cutting edge technology, and some of it was new, some of it was maybe a little bit untested. And as a business leader, you've got to balance this. You want to be the one who does have the new and cutting edge technology, but if there's one thing I've learned, it can never come at the expense of stability. So that was, I think, important for us, is making sure that we were slower and more deliberate about launching those things. Not slower in the sense that you want to miss an opportunity to engage in new technology that's out there. It just it's changing so fast and so rapidly that it's really easy to get distracted by kind of the shiny new thing that's going to do this or it's going to do that. And so for us, I think it was actually finding the right platform that we felt like we could innovate within that platform and not lose the stability that is so important to building that trust and confidence with our field and with our customers.
Yeah, you want to be innovative and forward leaning, but you also don't want to be a partner's beta or
Right.
or pilot. You want to make sure that it's tested. I mean, that at least is table stakes, making sure that the technology works, because there's nothing that can erode trust more quickly than someone just not even being able to transact with the company. So I think
Right.
that's a wise approach. I also want to learn a little bit more about what you're seeing as a newer company, in the trenches today. What do you feel today's distributors are looking for that might be different from those from even just about 5 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's an important one, I think, for all direct selling executives and even top field leaders to be considering. I guess I'll use this analogy just to share it, because I thought of this and it made sense to me. I think the distributors of kind of companies from before, even 5 or 10 years ago, were a little bit like pick the sport, a player of an NFL team, where they put on that jersey of that company, and that's the team they play for. That's that is who they are repping out there in the space. And I think today's distributor is a little bit more like NASCAR. They have some different stickers on that car, and they're going to promote the company that is on trend, that consumers want. And the moment that stops, that sticker may get scratched off of there. Now, I want to be clear that when I say that, I'm speaking mainly to that seller, mainly to that customer acquisition, or what we might call more of the affiliate style direct seller. But the truth is the future of our industry is attracting those people and helping them be successful. So I do think that your top leadership still lives in that space where they do need to be very committed to a direct selling company, but that seller front end, companies have to be a little bit more understanding that they may be selling other things. And in fact, it's probably the biggest challenge of direct selling companies and executives of direct selling companies is, how do you navigate that from a policies and procedures standpoint? How do you protect people's businesses in an environment where they probably are going to be selling and promoting more than one thing? And that has been a big challenge for companies to navigate, us included. That's the changing landscape that I see. And companies that can figure that nuance out are the ones I think that are positioned to grow in the future.
I agree. I think brand monogamy is slowly fading, and I'm curious, how do you approach that? Are you allowing people, is it up to a certain rank, to share and promote multiple brands as long as they're non-competing? How are you approaching it?
Yeah, I think the key is what you just said there, Wayne. It's actually really defining and being very clear about what's competing. We invite, our affiliates that join Make Wellness. We want them to, of course, we would love it if all they ever wanted to promote is Make Wellness, but we're not ignorant that they're going to be selling other things. So our ask is that you keep that, space of competition within that narrow product with Make Wellness. So if somebody wants to promote, other complementary products or other different types of things. Hey, we think that's great. They're developing their brand online. A lot of these sellers want multiple streams of brands that represent. That is great. But we want to keep the confusion to a minimum with the consumer. And so our approach has been, let's draw lines around what is competing. That conversation changes a little bit when you talk about from products to opportunity, because it can get very gray when you're talking about, it's more clear when you're talking about a competing product. What about a competing opportunity? And so to your point, that's where we've drawn this delineation to say, hey, if you want to be involved in Make Wellness and you want to earn an override on a team of individuals, we want you to be exclusive from promoting an opportunity to Make Wellness. If that doesn't work for you, that's okay too. But they participate just in our affiliate front end selling side. And the back end is reserved for those who want to be exclusive to promoting that opportunity that is Make Wellness.
In such a product focus, customer focused company, how are your leaders successfully balancing the two value propositions around product and consumer versus the business opportunity?
I think a lot of them have just kind of naturally figured out and kind of gravitated more towards promoting, products online. There's probably less business promotion online than there used to be. That those conversations appear to be a little bit more natural. So they seem to be able to navigate it fine. And ultimately, from my standpoint, I believe it's the company's responsibility to create an opportunity that they want to stay engaged with and promote. And if they feel like this is not the best opportunity for them, that's the company's responsibility. That's not on the distributor themselves. I like to say these are type A meat eaters. They'll work 24 hours a day when you get the opportunity right. So I look at that as our responsibility to create something that they want to stay exclusive to and promote. And if that's not the case, that's on us, not on them.
So I want to kind of look back in our last few minutes to some of the biggest lessons and leadership learnings. What do you feel as you look back over the last, 2 years or so? What was one of the most important leadership lessons that you've learned so far?
That is a great question. We've traversed some of that ground already in terms of, just the communication and the trust and the transparency. I think one of those things, this maybe is the kind of cross section of all of those different discussions that we've had today, in actually creating a culture where the leaders feel not just unified with the corporate leadership team, but they feel unified with each other. I think anytime this kind of team versus team dynamic creeps into your culture, it can be really dangerous for companies. So I think one of the things that we've taken a real concerted approach on is creating a group of leaders who really are collaborative, work well together. I believe it's actually a little bit of the secret to the success here is that these teams, they cross-pollinate information. They're very, very free and open with that. And I think that in just kind of looking backwards at other experiences I've had, over the years in the industry, if we can keep that culture here at Make Wellness, and it's a very inclusive culture, that is ultimately the secret to future success.
Is there anything that this is kind of along the same lines, but is there anything that you would do differently? A single decision that you might redo if you could wave a magic wand?
Well, we like I said, we made we made a lot
We
of
hit it already.
mistakes, and yeah, and some of those decisions with, nobody wants to go in and have to change some comp plan things. And so, of course, if I could go back and do it over, I wouldn't step in the same potholes maybe that I stepped in, from that standpoint. I think really, I wouldn't change any of that. I think you learn every step of the way across that process. There's probably some nuances in there, maybe with the way we leveraged the trend of peptides. Maybe as I look backwards and I see some of those things come. We obviously are not selling or the prescribed like GLP-1 type peptides. I think that they exploded even faster than anybody could have imagined that they came onto the space. And so, positioning ourselves as complementary or supportive of those things that a lot of consumers are choosing to do is probably something that, if I had that magic wand and could go back and do it again, I might position us right out of the gates as that kind of, positioning, where we've had to pivot just a little bit on that. But that's okay. I mean, that's business.
Yeah, each decision is an opportunity to learn. I agree. So what can companies that are further in their life cycle learn from today's early stage companies like Make Wellness?
I think the first and most important one is that the opportunity is still alive and well. Again, we said it at the top of the call. It's less about is the industry viable and more about saying what pivots or shifts need to take place so that we can grow in the new and modern approach to direct selling. And so I think it's first and foremost having that confidence of, hey, we are viable. People want, and not only want, but they need companies like ours. I think beyond just the product and even the financial opportunity that we offer, I think our companies do something very special, especially in kind of today's society of division and all of these things, is we can be the beacons that say, hey, look at this massive group of people that can come together, different beliefs, different ideas, all sorts of different viewpoints on the world, but we could be unified under a common set of values within this company. I think we can be an example that can work too. Like, we don't have to be a divided society, that we can be unified together. So to me, it's a message of positivity, confidence in who we are in our space and where we can go. And ultimately to, companies that maybe, have more history, it's not being afraid to make some of those pivots and shifts. And it's not easy. Change management, again, is maybe one of the hardest things that a company can do, but it's evolve or die. And so ultimately it's having the courage to do it. And I've often said, I'd rather be the company that crashes and burns because we took a chance and made a pivot and it failed than the one who dies that slow death, So I think that's ultimately the message.
Well, I think that is a perfect message to end on today, Justin. I want to thank you for sharing your insights. Also want to congratulate you and the entire team there on the incredible success. We're going to continue to watch, continue to cheer you on from the sidelines. So please give our best to everybody back there. And we look forward to seeing you at DSU.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be on, and I appreciate the work that you guys do in, continuing to promote our space and continuing to, be this beacon of education. I think it's really critical, and just appreciate you having me on today. And I'm absolutely looking forward to the event coming up here in April, and hope I get a chance to meet many of you in person.
Thank you for tuning in. Please take a moment to subscribe and give a 5-star rating and review to help Direct Approach continue to provide more candid insights and interviews for direct selling corporate executives. And don't forget to register for our upcoming spring events at dsnevents.com. Secure your spot now. Thank you for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.